Good evening. Welcome to the Ww3 Report and news. We don't have very much news unless we want to hear about the cocaine at the White House. They're trying to cover that one up. Yeah. Is anybody going to be tested, or is they just going to say, "Oh no, nobody's going to be tested"? If nobody's going to be tested, you're going to wonder who it was. I say Jill
Oh,
Biden.
they're running all over. They're running all over in the White House, barefooted, smearing that stuff around.
Who knows? It could have been anybody. I mean, everything from Secret Service to um, Biden's, their grandkids are even older. They got great grandkids now. It could have been
Well,
Hunter.
there's a
It could
lot
have
of
been
people that walk there.
it could have been Joe or Jill. It could have been the cook. It could have been housekeeping. It could have been staff. It could have been aides. It could have been. There's
What
too
about Mr.
many.
Sullivan? It could have been Mr. Sullivan. That's what I think.
I think during Trump administration, they claimed during the Obama administration they had close to 200 staffers at the White House as a groundskeeper,
So
gardeners, electricians, everything, security. So
I think this explains their foreign policy.
yeah, I think I think it goes to show you, William, because we never heard that Iran, well, no, I'm gonna say South America, Colombia, with going back to the Clinton days, that never quit. They just moved um, their flight lines. I mean, we've been pointing this out for 30, 40 years that they just moved their flight lines. They never quit, you
Well,
know.
it's no surprise they don't want the border closed now.
And no, and we know that they did have a place down a warehouse down in Mexico that they were funneling through to the United States. They did not only Fast and Furious out of there, but the cocaine, the crack, the meth, the marijuana, the who knows? It could even be fentanyl right now. China keeps
Well,
saying we're doing fentanyl.
the transporters really like those Rockwell Aero Commander twin engine aircraft because they're fast. They haul load. If the CIA drug runners like an airplane, it's got to be good.
Yeah, they were part of that back then too. That's why they ignored us. And it makes sense that the FBI told us, we were last on the list and they still haven't been here. Why do you think we hit up Hunter Biden so bad in the courts here? Because we're slamming them. I'm not going to say it's a vendetta or vengeful, but we're so sick of them covering up everything that happened here. That we know the FBI, the CIA, and the Department of Justice, and all of them are covering up so much for the Hunter Biden that
Well,
this
you can't
judge
make
isn't
it
going to
go
give them
away
no.
because you can't make the stories go away because nobody's that damn dumb.
Yeah. Um, Now, William, we got these um, um, migrants coming over. Now, I'm talking the ones that want to go through citizenship legally. Well, the test lows are bad. The scores are so low that people aren't passing anymore. And it's raising concerns of those with low English skills is the issue because they're not made to speak English here. They're not really made to learn English in school. They're what are they catering to them? Is it like a coddle? I guess is what they would call it. So they're now wanting to lower the test is going to be updated now. And some immigrants and advocates worry changes will hurt test takers with lower levels of English proficiency.
They want to do lower it to like communism.
I think it's
I mean,
just
the reason we have the test is so that they can grasp what America is all about. If you can't connect the dots, how are you going to become valuable citizen. I mean, you can become a worker and still not be a valuable citizen.
Now, see, this is what they're going to do. They said the immigration services are going to propose a new test that adds speaking sections to assess English skills. An officer would be allowed to show photos of ordinary scenarios like daily activities, weather, or food, and ask the applicant to verbally describe the photos. So go show them photos.
So how does that work for our history?
Don't.
I mean, they're going to show them pictures of George Washington and cherry tree and hatchet. I mean, what are they going to do? Are they going to?
Now, there's one that said that she learned English as an adult after moving to the US and found the pronunciation to be very difficult. She worries adding new speaking section based on photos rather than personal question will make the test harder for other like her because there could be a meaning to the pictures. So even the ones that don't have a problem taking these tests that have came into this country with the need and the want to become a U.S. citizen, not just for the free stuff. And there's plenty of them out there taking the test, and it runs 9 to 12,000 to be able to get through the testing process. And then you have people walking across the border that now they're going to lower it for them people.
If you say so.
Yeah, okay. I think. All right. So now you told me about this one when you asked me about it. I said, you know what? I really don't know about this. The U.S. Navy stops Iran from seizing 2 oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. Now, if everybody remembers, Karen, you might. My friend's son was on a ship around Oman when they blocked the 2 ships in. Do you remember that, William?
Yeah, they were doing their piracy thing.
And they blocked some of our Navy ships in. And so this is the same area. When I quickly tried to look into it and asked my Navy friend out of San Diego, I said, hey, do we still have boats over there or ships over there to watch Oman? And he said, yes. That's why they were able to stop it so quickly before it happened. So now I'm going to go ahead and let you talk about it a little bit more because you know more about it than I do.
So today they had a Iranian frigate in the Strait of Hormuz fire on a tanker. I think it may have been a tanker registered to Oman, but I'm not sure. But they fired like a 50 millimeter cannon round and ricocheted off the superstructure of the tanker. And I don't know what they were trying to do, but that's really reckless. Is that what you had in mind?
Yeah.
It's about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
there's no reason ever to fire on a tanker. They can't defend themselves. You can just pull to the side and board. I mean, how are they going to stop you? They can't take evasive action. They can't outrun you. They just pull alongside if you want to board, but don't shoot at them. There's no reason for it. That's just vicious.
Yeah. Oh boy. The other thing is, and this is out of Military Times, because I go to look there for our military for Ww3 reports. And oddly enough, I found this article about the senators, Democrat senators, want to give the Pentagon UAP, that is unidentified anomalous phenomena, UFO research, more money part because of the Chinese spy balloon and the U.S. jets shot down after it drifted across the United States. They say that they would rather spend the money on looking at are the UFOs spy planes from China.
So that's like the people that keep calling up and saying that they want me to donate to the police, but it actually will never go to police. It'll just go to some political action thing that has nothing to do with the police. Well, they're going to do the same thing with this UFO things because they already know the answer, right? They've already done the research. It's been going
Yeah.
on for 75 years. They already have the answers. So they're just going to take the money and put it where they want it to be. They don't need to increase the spending. All they have to do is just issue a report.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend very much time on it. I just think that the whole the UFO thing, because I went to Branson and I listened to this guy talk about UFOs, and to me it seemed a lot of experimental aircraft. We don't, what got me thinking this is in the 80s, in the 80s. When I was stationed at Beale Air Force Base, I was able to talk to the pilot of the SR 71. He said, they built this back in the early 50s. He said, can you imagine the technology they have now? Now, so that was my thing. Can you imagine the technology they've had since 1950 to now, what they're able to do?
Well,
I'm just starting to think this is
around for 10 or 15 years before they let anybody know.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, everybody's kind of being flippy with the UFO thing, and I believe more in portals, like with Skinwalker Ranch, than I believe these flying things that are going zip zip zip. I think this is to me is experimental aircraft, but the UFOers are going to be upset at me. They're going to get mad, and they're going to call me bad names.
My thing is government just put up or shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they want to put it into spy stuff, let them.
Quit dragging this out and finish it and show it, or forget it. We're done. No, yeah. We don't want to listen anymore.
Yeah.
You just hide it. You'll tease us with it and then run away and hide.
Yeah.
It's like, when the kids during the summer come up and knock on the door and run away. That's what they're doing, except they're just doing it,
I think it's to cover up for something they're doing, and they don't want us looking at certain things.
They're
like
just
Ukraine.
Trying to change subjects in the narrative of whatever's going on in the day in the news.
Ukraine. And the thing with Ukraine is Russia and Ukraine. To me, it just reminds me of two little kids on either side of the line saying, don't step over this line, but you're the one that's going to be the bad guy. And they're doing that over this nuclear power plant. Zaporizhia.
Zaporizhia, yeah.
Yeah, Zaporizhia.
Zaporizhia.
I ought to. Here, I'll just. I'm going to throw it in the chat. So everybody, Karen, here you go. Karen can try to figure this one out. She's good at this stuff.
So the nuclear power plant has been shut down to its minimum level. All right, it's just kind of simmering along. They could pretty much wipe that thing out, and nothing would happen if they knocked the tops off those buildings. It's not going to really matter because they're not going to have a runaway situation because the system is basically at low idle. It's not like Chernobyl that ran away because it was running way too hot and they couldn't shut it down. This has already been turned down, turned off. If Fukushima had been turned down and turned off, and they had all that damage happen to it, very little would have happened except for spillage of contaminated water. But all the stuff put up in the atmosphere would never really happen. Why would you put a nuclear power plant right on the beach?
And the thing about it is, Ukraine was planning that this is what, according to Russia, Ukraine was planning to strike on the nuclear power plant with high precision weapons and kamikaze drones. And Kyiv was also preparing to strike the area with a Tochka U missile with warhead filled with radioactive waste. Now, that's the first I've heard of that. And I brought it up only because have you heard about that before? Tochka U missile with warhead filled radioactive waste.
So if they did hit it, it's just going to contaminate the local area in the town. It's not going everywhere. It's just going to make a mess out of the town. It's not going to be a reactor cooking off that's going to be spewing radioactivity around the world. It's just going to be a local.
Yeah, and the Russian report was pretty intense.
She said. This is all just he said, she said. And likely it has nothing to do with anything. It's likely a diversion to distract the other guy when they're trying to do something up north. We're not going to know what's really happened in that area. No real information gets out of the battlefield.
No. Well, the only thing that's really came out was this. And then, of course, Russia or Ukraine saying, oh, no, they were going to strike it, and their report is wrong. So Russia had this great big long report, and Ukraine basically had a little itty bitty 2-sentence report saying no, we weren't going to do it. They are. And now we had, Ukraine is supposed to keep our reporters safe, and I had 2 of my reporters, the one in Crimea, one in Ukraine, got a hold of me over the yesterday. I'm going to say over the holiday, but it's yesterday, saying pretty much that there may be 3 or 4 reporters that were killed. And oddly enough, they said 2 were killed. The 3rd and 4th one are in critical condition, and they were all Fox News. And they were separating them from the other media, saying, "Oh, you guys can come over here closer to the front lines, and then these guys are going to come over here where it's safe." And Fox News fell for it, is what I'm hearing.
The front line's a meat grinder. Don't go there.
Yeah.
It's a meat grinder. Would you go to the front lines, into the trenches in World War I? Well, what are you doing in that area? They have drones now to figure out where each other's at. They don't have to, get a biplane up and hope they can figure out, explain it to their commander and try to draw it on a map that was drawn by people that had never seen the ground from the air. These guys have GPS. If you're spotted, you're a target. Don't go there.
Yeah, and ours, the ones that I keep track of, they sneak around. They look like civilians. They don't have press on their back. How easy of a target are you when you got press, big letters on the back of your shirt?
From a drone, press looks like just another ant on the ground.
Yeah.
They can't identify them. So stay 40 miles back. Stay out of artillery range, or you're going to get killed. If you see all the Ukrainians coming back in body bags, you see all the Russians coming back in body bags, why do you want to go and fill a body bag with your body?
Yeah. So
This isn't like in Vietnam where the Americans had superior air power and strike aircraft and Overwatch and all this other business. These people have nothing. They're out there on their own on the front lines. And if you show up, you're going to die.
Yeah.
We
Now
keep our
you mentioned
reporters say it
Yellen.
gets off.
Didn't you mention Yellen going over to? Was she going to go to the? Um, it was a. There's an ongoing, or no, it was a ongoing agreement that the EU for human right over powers, trades, human rights, and money issues, and Ukraine war, but China has abruptly canceled the visit and said that they're not going to go. Their ambassadors aren't going. Now, was Yellen going to this? Do you know?
Well, she was going to go over and discuss issues that have to do with banking, period, I think. And then, but then China got upset and said they're no longer going to ship any of their semiconductors to the United States. So I guess that was a bust.
Yeah, the foreign minister was real vague on the whole topic, and China's um, said that Europe relations they have been maintained, but Europe seems to keep pushing issues and levels of more war, not a type of a ceasefire or an agreement to quit the war. And that was all that they were pretty much saying. And they said um, they rescheduled it for April. I mean, it's July. I mean, April like was a few months ago, but now we're looking at over a half a year away, almost a year away.
Well, I said that she was going to just uh, embolden them, and
Yeah. Um,
so why would you send a munchkin into the lion's den?
yeah.
Unexpected.
I think it. I think they gave an April date, William, only because it's never going to happen. I think that was China's way of saying, "Jay, forget it. We're going to make it for a
Well,
year
they
from
don't
now."
want to say absolutely never. There's no possibility ever. They're just trying to say, yeah, if we change our mind.
China, yeah. Oh, China. Oh, yeah. We'll do it like
China's just
2050.
trying to leave themselves an out in case something happens in the world and they actually need to sit down with others.
You know what I think it was because when I was got the info from my friend in Japan, or I'm sorry, Taiwan. He said it was kind of like they were like, uh, well, something might happen between now and um, the first of the year, and we don't want to make any promises. And that's what he
Well,
heard. And then all of a
the
sudden
United
now
States,
the EU and the United States comes out with, oh, there's this agreement for April. And so he was asking me, did the April date really happen? What are you hearing? I said, no, I haven't heard of no new date. I just heard that, they had canceled the meeting. So, but
well,
see,
we issued a travel warning to Americans going to China. I can't imagine that made them real pleased either because it's hard to steal stuff from, foreigners that don't show up on your shore. I mean, intellectual property and that sort of thing. And nobody's showing up with bags of money like uh, Gates did. So,
we had this, now everybody, not everybody, a lot of the news is talking about this. Jenin on Wednesday, a campaign against Palestinian terrorists. And the people are uprising. And so, of course, I hit my friend up in Israel and I said, what is really going on on Gaza Strip or the West Bank? And he says, the people, actual Palestinians, they don't like Hezbollah. They don't like these mercenaries. They don't like Hamas. They don't want Iran in their business. And they said what they did notice is when the protests picked up, of English speaking, perfect English speaking protesters in black. And he said then now all of a sudden the Palestinians are pointing and saying Antifa. So Antifa is part of the protests over there.
No doubt.
Yeah, that's where they run every time there's a protest in another country. Boy, they're up and running. So
Well, but either they're fascists or communists.
yeah, and these
So,
so-called refugees camps that they stormed. They said these were mercenary or terrorist camps. These weren't refugee camps, but that's what they're claiming, and they're warning um, the United States not to fall for these homeless camps. That what's going to move in there is like what they have, the terrorist camps, where MS-13 or ISIS or some of these other people would take over and claim, which is easier for them to um, pull together a unit to go after a city if needed. That was the other thing that was a warning.
well, they're already illegal. How difficult is it to radicalize and organize?
That's right.
Um, that's what our special forces do. Uh, you think they didn't learn from us in the last 20 years?
Yeah. Now, we mentioned Fukushima earlier, and weirdly enough, there was an article today that the nuclear plant water release is safe, they say. You know, do we trust them? Do we
Yeah,
trust the
go bathe it and see how
IAEA?
long you last. Go bathe it and see how long you last.
Well, that's why I would never go to Hawaii with my sister. I was like, I get radiated over there in Hawaii.
Well,
The water's
that's
radiated. And
a
she's like,
quarter
oh,
way
you're
around
such a
the world.
conspiracy
But you
theorist.
release it right there. You release it right there. You jump in, and 30 seconds later, your skin falls off.
Yeah.
So it's not safe.
So it's the last of it. They're claiming that they want to reassure the local residents that it's a planned release and the treated wastewater from Fukushima is safe. And the
Well,
IAEA
it's
has
safe.
approved the planned dump of the wastewater now.
It's safe in the fact they're not going to be breathing it, but don't eat the wildlife around there for quite a while.
Well, the thing
Don't
is
ingest.
have they increased the um, the nuclear waste, because that's what they did in California when they were starting to see the nuclear waste and the meters going up and what was acceptable for the waters. They just raised it when it went up. So that's what I was wondering. And I went and looked, and they have no data on any of the levels of nuclear or radiation from the water. There's no data on it.
They're not going to share with you the isotopes. They stopped doing that, like, what, 2 weeks after the accident, as soon as they figured out that we'd go by
Hmm.
field effect meters and see what the background radiation was. And then once we figured out what the background radiation was, they just said, oh, well, no, it's safe now because we raised the limit.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
whatever.
And of course, I talked to that gentleman in Taiwan, and I asked him, I said, what do you got? He said, get this. He said, you know how the China was playing chicken with the U.S. ships in the straits, and even international waters out into the Pacific, and they were getting closer. They were almost bumping them. He said, well, they've changed gears, he said, and what they're doing now is they are surrounding Philippine and South Korea fishing vessels and running into them. They're not just coming close or playing chicken or a little bit of a bump. No, they're playing chicken but running into them. And me and you talked before the show, and I said I really believe that this is to try to get a rise out of them. And I asked you the question, well, what about Japan? And that was his question. If they can't get a rise out of Philippines or um, South Korea, would they do Japan? Or maybe, and I went back and looked, and it was Japan and Australia. You said something about Japan during, what was it?
So during World War II,
There you go.
Japan. I don't know if you've heard of the rape of Nanking. Japan was absolutely brutal with the Chinese people, and I can't imagine for all the world that China wants to stir up that hornet's nest again, because it didn't work out really great last time. Now, you have to remember, China and Japan have gone back and forth warring between each other for the last 3,000 years. So it's not like one's better than the other. It's just the last one was so brutal that maybe nobody wants to play that game again.
Yeah, and now we've even got the top Chinese diplomats are telling Japan and South Korea and the Philippines that they might need to align with the CCP.
Yeah, that's never going to happen with Japan. Japan and China are, that's just an oil and water situation. They're never going to vulcanize. So people don't realize that China is basically xenophobic. All right, they will do business with people. They'll allow people in, but they don't necessarily like them in the government. Okay, and Japan's the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And Japan and China are xenophobic between each other. So China and Japan getting along is like China and the Uyghurs getting along together. It's not going to happen.
No.
No.
And then the other thing that came out of Taiwan this week, over the last few days, is that they're holding submarine drills out in the Pacific Ocean, but they're crossing into out of their own waters into Pacific waters that are forbidden. And it was Taiwan that caught them and notified the Navy. But William, I don't think Taiwan needs to notify our Navy. I think they already know. I mean, they're watching them close. And I don't think they would just let submarines.
As long as they're in international waters, they have the right to be there.
Well, they're crossing over that little bit, that little bit to go, yeah, we went over there just a little bit. What are you going to do about it? Yeah, we crossed a little bit more. What are you going to do about it? I think that's all they're doing. It's this cat and mouse game.
Yeah, they have a median line that's between the two countries. That median line separates their economic fishing zones, but they're not crossing into like the 12-mile limit of shore on either side. So,
and they're doing.
They're just in the identification area, and it's all about just poking at each other to get each other to put each other's aircraft up.
And you said they just did a drill. No, the U.S. just did a drill. Was it the U.S. or was it?
So in Alaska 2 weeks ago or so, we had red flag. It's operational readiness inspection and the Air Force's version of Top Gun. But we invited our partners in the Pacific region that came up, and so they were part of these it's a contest, all right, and see who would get the best scores and who tested
Yeah, and
China
Taiwan is
realized.
saying the only reason why, on the very last day, is when China started their submarine operation
So
drills.
China and Russia and North Korea, they have no equivalent of what we did at Red Flag. Um, so when we train and test each other at Red Flag, we make each other better. Not in small drips and drabs. We make each other seriously better because you get a score about how you performed with respect to your peers, and if you didn't get a good score, you not only got a not as good a score, but they explain to you why you didn't get as good a score. So now you have something to go back and work on. So there's like no ambiguity now about where you stand with respect to your peers, and that makes people very strong. Well, they don't have that equivalent in China and Russia. They don't share those kinds of informations in extreme detail. Yeah, they might go sortie together and stuff like that in ships, but it's not the same as involving themselves in it against a hostile force and trying to gain the most kills, if you will, and dominate the aggressor force. So there's nothing in the rest of the world that's the equivalent. In fact, all of our European partners come to the United States to do this, and then once you get scored and whatnot in Red Flag or Top Gun, fighter weapons training for the Navy, then you go back to your countries and your American counterparts and you do aggressor stuff in your own countries to work on wherever your deficiencies are. The West has this as a group, but these Red Pack doesn't have this sort of joint training yet.
Mm-hmm.
They don't hear the same kind of battle doctrine. They don't. They can function together to a degree, but they don't have common interoperability. They don't have common terminology. They don't have common battle doctrine. They don't have the same kind of ability to restrain their forces as well as deploy their forces. It's the difference between what Saddam Hussein had and the United States and the other international players that came together in Desert Storm. It's just not a contest. And until Red Pack starts doing things like that and actually testing each other, but they're not going to do that because they don't trust each other enough to share. Mm-hmm. These are closed type societies. They're not going to share what little bit of strength they have over each other and give that away in the guise of, well, we'll be able to fight the West better, because the fact is they're just frenemies. They'll only ever be just frenemies because they're only getting along because the West exists right now. Otherwise, they would be at each other's throats.
Yeah. Now, the other day, and I had to go back and look at the article that I had up, but it was over the cluster munitions. And I think the reason why I wanted to ask you about it was what I brought up today on the phone is these are different from what Princess Di had. They were digging these other ones up that she was uncovering. And aren't these just laid out on the road? I think so. Go ahead and go into the.
You're thinking about with Princess Di, those are landmines that are buried. They're concealed, and you know, plants come back and grow over them, and the only way to find them is with metal detectors. They're out there with prods trying to find them from the side. In the event one might blow up, that they'll be off away into the side, hoping it's not one that bounces up and then sprays out. Like we call those bouncing betties. So those are not just anti-personnel mines, they're anti-vehicle mines, or anti-armor mines. They're just brutal weapons that never go away. Now, cluster munitions, they're marvelous. Because half of them go off at the time, or more than half, maybe a third don't, and the third slows everybody down. But they're not underground. They can be seen with the naked eye.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is to destroy the road, destroy the machinery that's around, destroy the personnel, and whoever survives and comes along next can't move forward without getting rid of the unexploded ordnance. So then they have to go around and identify each one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they'll take day glow spray.
Well, that and kids are
paint
picking
around
them up. They're saying
until explosive ordnance disposal can come up forward, move it out of the way, so that they can proceed forward. Well, by then they've lost the initiative, and those mines have done their work. But they're easily seen.
Yeah.
And you know, you can train people to understand what those are. Just don't touch them. You see them, walk the other way. Just step away from it. You're safe. You know where it's at. You're not going to step on it. They're easy to see. Most of them, they look like kind of like little birds, butterflies, whatever you want to call them. Quite often, they have day glow colors on them, so that people will see them, because the idea is to get the opposing force to stop. If they see those things sitting out there, not blown up, right? If you can see them, they haven't blown up. It brings everything to a halt, because if you move forward, you're going to blow the tracks off your track vehicles. You're going to blow tires up. You're going to knock holes in the hulls of the vehicles. You're going to get your people, hurt. So, and you have there's a big danger of those things going off, and then your own weapons going off as well. And it's your weapons going off that's a real big danger. So it just brings everything to they're a wonderful weapon. I mean, if you're going to use any weapon, it's one of those weapons that you can see. It's not like the drone up in the air with the grenade you're not going to see coming, or something like that. I mean, you're not going to see the initial barrage of these things coming down, these cluster munitions. But once they're on the ground, it's not a big deal, because you can see them. You can deal with them. It just slows you way down for a while. Yeah. And that's the idea behind them.
Yeah. And they have, Russians have been going through, they're sending their people through to get these cluster munitions out of harm's way, especially for the kids.
Yeah, well, that's what they do, the explosive ordnance disposal. They'll take them and put them in a small water tank, move them off to the side, pour that into a pit until they get enough of them, and they'll throw some C4 and explosive in with them and destroy them all, and then push and cover the hole up. But they have to wait for the people to come forward. They have to wait for the people to come up that deal with those small devices that have the body armor, that can deal with it without endangering their lives. And it just takes time. It's a time killer. And that's the idea
Yeah.
behind it is
Yeah, because there ain't
drop
no
and
machine that's going to go around and pick these things up.
yeah, it's
You got
not
to do it
like
by hand.
a
That's
poison gas or
Diana was
something that's going to
running the
stay with
same
people
thing.
forever. So it's fairly humane. I mean, no bombing is really humane, but in the scheme of war, it's better than poison or white phosphorus or uh, something that will stay with you forever and ever, burn your skin, damage your nervous system.
Yep.
It's just something that maims you instantly, or it doesn't. Well, that's what a bullet does. Well, that's what an artillery shell. It's as far as the World War goes, it's a kind of good weapon. It's kind of if you're not going to have a directed weapon where you have a directed munition, if it's going to be an area weapon to use, it's kind of a good weapon. It certainly beats somebody carpet bombing you with 2,000 pounders and creating a moonscape. That's far more destructive. Nothing survives that. At least you have a chance with this. So, yeah, war's ugly, and this is ugly, but this is not as ugly as things can get.
Oh, yeah. And the next thing I wanted to get into is what the name of the show was about hostages, because as we're moving closer and closer to war, and look at Iran, could have taken those old tankers and they would have had hostages. Now, you had a really interesting story about a girl that was a hostage, and then a lot of remarks on how we handle our hostages. So I'm going to turn it over to you and go for it. I think we got about 10 minutes of the show left. So I figure this is going to take 10, 15, 20 minutes. So go for it,
So
William.
we have tier 1 operators. We call them Special Forces, Delta Force, the SEALs, Rangers, Green Berets, Marine Raiders. We call them MARSOC. We have Air Force forward air controllers, and we have air rescue, pararescue. So these are all tier 1 operators in the community, in the special operations community. They consider themselves as operators. So if you were a SEAL, what I just explained to you, these are all operators. Now, operators get involved in a number of issues. One that they get involved in is reconnaissance and overwatch. So the Air Force, we do overwatch of our forces. Can't always see us, but we're there. And our SEAL friends are like SEAL Team 6. They go, and they're typically more of the type that are air mobile. So they will do things like parachute into an area or zip cord into an area. It's rapid insertion. And they like to do their thing at night because the United States owns the night. All right. Then there's also, we get involved in something that's called hostage rescue, and we also we go after what's called high value targets. Now, we're not talking cities, we're just talking individuals or very small groups. For those, we use special forces because we don't create a big footprint. We don't want to rile up the people we're trying to pacify, if you will, civilize in a way, in our way. So it doesn't do us any good to go and create more enemies than we had to begin with, right? So we'll use our special forces. Well, one of the things that we do is if an American is taken hostage anywhere in the world, is the same as an attack on all of us. So one of the things that they do is hostage rescue. So in Somalia, there was a school teacher and her fellow aid worker, Paul Fitzbeck from Hughes Danish. Jessica is an American, and she left here in the United States being a school teacher because she was just disheartened by what she was seeing here.
Yeah.
She went over to Somalia.
Yeah.
And she decided that she wanted to get involved in being an aid worker and teaching the children how to avoid getting hurt by landmines. All right, just what we were talking about a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she and Paul were about to go back to the airport in Mogadishu, and they came out of their living quarters and jumped in a car, and they had a new driver. And that should have been the first wake up part, but they didn't see it, okay, because they're civilians and they want to get back to the airport. They don't care what driver there is, as long as we're going to the airport. You know, we're going to be safe. We're going to the airport. Well, this guy was an Islamist from over what they call the Green Line. Over the Green Line, they have Islamist Somali pirates. And what do Islamist Somali pirates do? They take hostages, and then they try to get a ransom. So this driver was one of these, was a covert Somali pirate. He went the other direction, headed towards the Green Line, and the next thing you know, two other heavily armed trucks pull up beside them, and Jessica, Buchanan, and Paul were forced to go out and create their own graves and get ready to be executed. This is how it all starts, right? First, you intimidate them so you can control them. Well, there's a whole process for aid workers of how they deal with these things. And first of all, Jessica and Paul were afraid that nobody noticed they were gone. Well, they didn't show up for their airplane, so everybody's looking for them, and it quickly they become aware that, you know, they've been taken hostage. And the kidnappers, of course, contact everybody that they need, you know, they need a ransom. And they'll send emissaries over to where Paul and Jessica had been, and leave a message, you know, on a piece of paper, whatever, that'll show up on somebody's desk someplace. Well, then the State Department gets notified. The people who take care of these aid workers have a process. They have insurance. They have a number of things so that they can get ransoms to get their people out, and hopefully that works. Well, turns out these folks wanted a lot more money than even the aid, insurance, and hostage group could even deal with. And they were offered at one point more than $1.5 million and turned it down because they believed Jessica was worth, you know, far more than $1.5 million. Now, all those people that took her hostage could have lived out till their 80s on this $1.5 million. I mean, they don't make much money there, but, you know, still. And so they took them out into the bush and basically kept them under some trees and lived there for months. And you know, these guys were eating cod, they're wound up, they're happy because they've made the West feel powerless, you know, and these pirates have felt powerlessness all their lives, so if they can, you know, spread the misery around, they feel kind of good about it. And then, of course, the hostage negotiations were breaking down, and once the negotiators were notified, they notified the State Department. The State Department notified the U.S. government. The U.S. government notified the FBI. The FBI notified the families of Paul and Jessica, and of course the White House got involved. Well, this is very early on, and they're going to be out there in the bush for several more months. Well, at the same time, 24 cell phones go off in the United States, and a bunch of bearded guys, that are all tatted up, that are part of a team called SEAL Team 6, all of a sudden get phone calls.
Yep.
And they come in and they're briefed and they start training. So for the next, 3 or 4 weeks, they're training nonstop to deal with these folks. So they've got all the intel they can on them. They'll have drones up looking for them. It goes on and on, the things that happen. They'll have aircraft that are just designed to keep track of cell phone calls and where they are so that they can try to locate them. Well, Jessica finally got sick, and she had a urinary tract infection that was spreading throughout her body, and they were afraid at this point that she might not live another 24 hours. And she went public with her captors. The captors thought it was great because, they're going to send the money sooner, because she's in dire straits. Well, the president green-lighted the operation to go and rescue Jessica. So there's two bad things are happening at the same time. One good thing is there's no moon, so our people own the night. That's great, but they had 20 knot winds, and it's rough landing in a parachute in 20 knot winds without getting drugged through the savannah. And the other part was they just had a solar storm, and communications were very spotty at best. So they might be out of communications for a while. So they loaded up on a C-130 out of Djibouti. They'd just flown in a couple hours earlier into Somalia all the way from the United States. All the things that they needed had been gathered together in Djibouti for this operation. That includes helicopters, C-130s, jump aircraft, Overwatch, all of it.
Yeah.
So they have a complete air package available. So at 20,000 feet, they're going to do what's called a halo jump. Now you can have a high altitude, high opening, which you come down in a parachute from almost the time you leave the aircraft, almost immediately. Or you can do a high altitude, low opening. So a high altitude, low opening is a very dangerous jump. And it's even more dangerous at night because you're hurtling towards the ground.
You can't see the ground.
At terminal velocity. Now you have infrared, okay? And your people are illuminated, and you're putting out an infrared light. So the enemy can't see infrared, all right? They can't see the light. You can see your own people as you go down. The problem is, where do you blow your canopies open so you can stop just before the ground? Remember I said low opening. So you want to go from terminal velocity to just the 60 feet per second just before you hit the ground. All right? So you're not going to be easily seen. So they did that. Only a couple guys weren't able to get their canopies collapsed quickly enough and got drugged a couple hundred yards. Got a little road rash, that kind of happens in 20 usually not wins. So they got together, and they're, a couple kilometers away from where Jessica is, and they start making their operation. And they get all their parachutes off, all their equipment they've just landed was between their legs except for their weapon. They've got up all their weapons now. They're got their night vision on. They've set up their perimeter. First thing they set up is security. All right, nobody moves anywhere without security, and that means you've got inner core that's moving forward, and you have outer bands that are looking out and away from you. And they typically use the snipers to do that, because when they finally engage their objective, they're going to take and go from the snipers pointing outward to the snipers pointing inwards.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to set up the people they're going to have to rush in a crossfire.
Now, now that was she a Olympian? This last one that they just released. Now, how odd is that for them to get this one out so quick and then having to go rescue these other ones? And isn't it a type of militia that goes and rescues them, kind of like they did with Bin Laden? I mean, it does got military, but for the most part, they used militia mercenaries.
If they're a NATO partner, we all have, like the British have what's called special air services. That's what our SEALs and Army Rangers were modeled on from the First World War.
Yeah.
Or Second World War, I'm sorry. And so after the killing of the Jewish team during the Berlin Olympics, then Germany went ahead and set up their own. Italy set up their own. After the problems they had with the Palestinian hijackings and whatnot, and Achille Lauro, and finally Entebbe, the Israelis set up their special forces. So most of the West has special forces. Is that what you're asking about?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So then these guys are at nighttime. It's pitch black. The people, the group that's holding the 9 or so guys, pirates that are holding these prisoners, as they move in, people can feel things even if they can't see things. And these guys started to rouse and become concerned what was out there. You get that buzzing in your head when something's wrong, especially when you're armed and it's at night and you're the guards. You know what I mean? You're in a heightened state, and as they get close, these guys become more attentive, more prepared for action, and so the SEAL teams move forward in a more concerted way. They're not worried about making sounds at this point. They're worried about closing the distance on these guys before any shooting erupts, because the first thing they want to do is protect Jessica at all costs. Their job is to keep the pirates from turning their weapons on the hostages. That's their number one goal. The second goal is to neutralize these guys. The third goal is to exfil the hostages. So, of course, a firefight erupts, and the two snipers on either side start cutting these guys down really quick. And the people in the center formation with the squad automatic weapon that's called a saw opened up. Be sure not to shoot towards the ground. They're just going at shoulder height, as hard as they can, trying to take these guys out as they rush in onto Jessica. Now, Jessica doesn't know what's going on at this point. This is just some ungodly thing, and she knows she's about to die. As far as she's concerned, she's going to die. She's trying to bury herself, make herself look small in the ground, and all of a sudden, all these people start piling on to her. And the next thing she hears is, "Are you all right, Jessica? We're here to take you home." And it just doesn't even register in his mind. Who are these? These are Americans. How did Americans get here? How do they know where I am? And of course, the Danish guy, he's like, "Oh, I'm so glad that I got taken hostage with an American, because he'd just die out in the desert. Danes aren't coming for him." Okay. In America, an attack on one American is an attack on all Americans. That's where the NATO doctrine comes in. An attack on one of our NATO partners is an attack on all of us. This is just something that's of value to the United States, and it trickles out into our Western allies. But this isn't something that is common through the rest of the countries of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's important to us in the United States, not only from a citizenship point of view, but also a world commerce point of view, because we can go anywhere in the world and feel rather safe, because countries that host us know that if our people get taken hostage, all kinds of god-awful things are about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So we have kind of a little special passport because of these operators, tier 1 operators. And they came in, they already had medicines, they had everything ready. So the SEALs piled on top of her, protecting her with their bodies, their body armor, their helmets, and their flesh, until this eruption's over. And these guys are completely neutralized. They grab up the other weapons. They grab up Jessica, throw her over their shoulder, and run out of the area. Now, they want to get away from the area because there might be reinforcements coming, all right? Because there was just a whole bunch of noise that just happened where they had their hostage, and they can be heard for miles. So they're getting out of the area as quickly as they can. And at the same time, they're working on Jessica. When they landed, they already had the intravenous medicine. They'd already talked to her doctor at home. They already knew her blood type. They'd already seen her x-rays. They already knew what different shots she'd already had before she came to the area. They know all about her. She doesn't know anything about them. These are just a bunch of tatted up, wild-looking guys with beards. They don't look. These aren't people that look like American soldiers. Okay, these guys look like special animals. They're meant to blend in wherever they are, and so they're set up to blend in Somalia. And they get her away. They work on her. They get a line established, start getting glucose in her blood, getting antibiotics in her. They start trying to feed her. They can only feed her a little bit at a time because they don't want to cause her to aspirate her food up into her lungs, because she's just gone through a terrible shock. And they heard some noise off to one side, and Jessica got piled on again. So she's been piled on a couple times now, and she finally asks him, "Why are you guys jumping on me?" And they tell her, "Jessica, we're protecting you. You're going home now." And it's starting to sink in. These are now her bodyguards. These are
Her
her
rescuers.
people. Yeah, well, but she doesn't understand this. She's a civilian. She's a school teacher. Okay, this is all a big shock to her system, and she's not in the best state in the first place. They're worried that she might not live another 24 hours. And so they've got her on IVs. Again, they're carrying her and running with her. So you can imagine being over somebody's shoulder in a fireman's carry and moving with another guy in trail holding an IV running right behind the first guy that's got you over his shoulders. And they get out to the LZ where the helicopters are going to land. Of course, they bark up that they're ready for the LZ. The helicopters swoop in, and they almost get the helicopters, and Jessica just jumps right off from her operator, sprints for the aircraft, and runs in the aircraft and sits down. She is ready to be gone.
Yeah.
They don't need to help her for that last bit.
I have a question. Now, this was back a while ago. Would they do the same thing today, you think?
Anywhere, anytime.
That's what I was thinking. Same thing.
Yeah.
Because listening to a lot of servicemen, the few that I know in the Navy, and then there's a few Army guys that send me emails for they're part of my sources, and they said the same thing. Nothing has really changed because when you have they say when you have a good plan, you stick to the good plan. You never change it unless they say you tweak it when things go wrong, and you find out what you did wrong and you fix it. And it's usually the same plan over and over, but just a different situation, different tactics.
These are the most capable guys on the planet. Now, each one of these teams, okay, like Team 2, I think.
Now you mentioned different. Now, you mentioned different teams, and everybody's got their own teams.
Right. Well, the teams specialize. Okay. So this one is land rescue and land recon and high value targets and Overwatch. Then there's another one that specialized in ship to shore. They've got another group that does clandestine stuff off from submarines.
Mm-hmm.
They have another group that's involved that do their stuff where it's involved in cities where there's high congestion areas. So each one of these teams has a specialty. So depending on where a hostage or a high value target or some reconnaissance needs to happen, they go to the team that specialize in that area. And so SEAL Team 6 just happened to be the people that do stuff like Bin Laden. This is the same thing as Bin Laden. Bin Laden just happened to be on the other end of the spectrum. We're not trying to save him. We're trying to give him an appointment with his maker. All right, we're not there to judge him. We're just there to get him to his maker to be judged. All right.
Yeah.
So this happens, and a guy comes forward in the aircraft, and Jessica's there. Of course, she's coming down from a shaking high. She's completely amped up at this point, and he hands her a folded flag. Says, "Welcome home," and they're off.
Mm-hmm.
And she's safe and alive, and it's good to be an American. And so she tells this story, and SEAL teams do this all the time.
Yes. Yes.
And they go in when other things won't do. Like if a hostage taken here in one of our cities, what do? They call hostage they call SWAT.
Negotiators. Yeah.
Right.
Hostage
So that's their
negotiators and
hostage
SWAT.
rescue for that area for the civilian type of this. And so they would be like a tier 2 force because they don't go outside the United States. That would be a tier 1 force. They would be a tier 2 or tier 3 force to make sure that hostages get negotiated for, and so they have the best outcome they can possibly end up with. And it's good to be American because we have people that are willing to go into harm's way for each other for no other reason than you're a school teacher from Ohio out putting yourself in harm's way to help kids not get their legs blown off with landmines.
Yeah.
That's good enough. That's all it takes for these guys. And you're a U.S. citizen. And if they know about it and they get greenlit by their command authority, they do what they're trained, and they like this stuff. This is the stuff they like because they're not having to do something negative here. They're not having to face up against evil just for the sake of pushing evil back. They're actually claiming something good from the evil, and they like that. And so that's the story of this.
So, well, boy, we went over today, but it's I when I heard the hostage story today, I thought, we haven't really addressed hostages, and as I think closer to the United States becoming involved, whether it's Ukraine or Israel or Taiwan or who knows, because of Cuba even being close, that let's learn a little bit on hostages, how we get our hostages back. So tonight I thought that was really important. And so, William, do you have anything left to add before we close for the night?
Go ahead and look up Jessica Buchanan and listen to her story. There's all kinds of stuff on YouTube, and it's a really fascinating story. And if you go to Sean Ryan's site on YouTube, he's an operator that has people from Marine Raiders and SEAL Team 6 and all these different groups that do long form interviews, and you get to know about what not only what they do, but what they go through emotionally and what they go through with their marriages, what they go through, what their life is like doing this thing. And keep in mind that they would be no other place in the world. They're not being drafted into this. These are all volunteers.
Yeah.
This is what they do. This is not just what they do. This is who they are. So if they have some negative repercussions individually, don't feel terribly sorry for them because they kind of knew what they were getting into. They kind of understood this, but this is who they are. This is where they wanted to be, and they're more than happy to do this. So, yeah, have a look and enjoy what you see, and it can be very illuminating as to how to keep your own self safe. And I think here in the future we're going to have some discussions on how you can keep yourself safe as a civilian. And I think that's what's coming next. We're going to have a little discussion on how to deal with situations.
Okay, William, that was boy, we had a great night for a show. And subscribe and share and thumbs up and hit that like button. Follow us over on Facebook. William, great hosting. I know I had you yak a lot tonight, but you were full of
useless information.
Oh yeah, well, not useless. So I don't know. Sometimes when I talk about spam, I thought that was useless, but everybody likes spam, I guess.
Well, I'm stuck in bed, For me, it's kind of useless information, but if I get to share it, it's not as useless.
No, and it's good info, and we're teaching everybody about what to expect if we do go to war. I mean, we're so close, and this is to me World War III. And everybody says, "Well, this isn't World War III because we're not at war." Well, I think we are. This is the closest America's ever seen to wars, and we have our allies in the middle of war, and we're there to help. So in ways, this is World War III, but it's just globally almost. So, okay,
Well,
William.
it's a massive destabilization that's going on, and
Hmm.
that's what happened before World War I. That's what happened before World War II, and it could happen before, God forbid. So let's pray it doesn't.
Yeah. So share the show tonight with your friends and family, and maybe the person behind you in the bank. Tell them about our show. Uh, I hope everyone told friends and family yesterday for 4th of July about our show. Hopefully, we'll get a lot more new viewers. All right. We will see you tomorrow. It'll be Thursday. I hope everyone had a great Wednesday. And we'll see you tomorrow for weather and lifestyle news and regular today and world news. So, William, boy, you got a few days to before Monday. You get to recoup.
Yeah, Miss Mickey needs a haircut. I think it's going to take me 2 or 3 days. I can only get part of her. She drags me across the kitchen floor, and I have to let her go.
Yeah, I just clipped mine, and a Chavoy puppy. It's fun. Okay, folks. So we will see you tomorrow. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and share, 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 and ring my bell. See you tomorrow, and God bless.